Level up your LA Kings experience with Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access and rewards. Enjoy great seats to the game in Section 103 along with Yamava Club access and parking included with your purchase. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings shop item at the game. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn perks on each purchase from the only leading ticket company with a rewards program. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings. Did you know the LA Kings have their own culinary partner? It's Superfood, celebrating 10 years and over 1 million meals served. Since 2020, the Kings have trusted Superfood to fuel their players. Now through Simply Lunch, you can bring that same performance-driven food to your office. Because when people eat better, they work better. Visit mysuperfood.com. That's mysuperfd.com. Or call 213-973-6145. Qualified companies can enjoy a free lunch for up to 10 managers.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
Welcome back, Kings fans. A new episode of All the Kings Men. Joining us today, Director of Amateur Scouting for your LA Kings, Mark Yannetti. How are you doing today, Mark?
Doing good, guys.
And featuring Zach Dooley. How are you doing today, Zach?
Jesse, ready to go.
All right, Mark, we've got 11 players that we want to grill you about, so we're just going to dive straight into it because we don't want to take up your day or anyone else's day. First round pick, 19th overall. You trade down, but only 2 spots. Let's just talk about right off the bat how the process of trading down 2 spots. It's a less dramatic trade down than in the previous 2 seasons.
We weren't anticipating trading down. We were anticipating picking at 17. At 17, we had a tier of 3 guys. One went early. But at 17, 2 of the 3 guys from that tier were there. Based on percentages and kind of having an idea of the type of player Washington takes and such, we had a high degree of confidence that one of those 2 guys would be there, and one was. So it became a real easy thing to move back. It's funny, we had 2 guys in that tier left, and it's funny how things work because a tier is supposed to be, you can sort it by any reason at all, but there were 3 guys who were dying to get Hermanson, and it was funny to a degree because once the list is made, the list is made. But people anticipated that one of the guys in the tier would be gone really early. Another guy would go before 15 or so, and I think they were like, "Oh, well, we don't have to fight for him because we'll get Hermanson anyway." And then it came that Hermanson and another guy were both there, and there were a couple guys that were like, "Oh shit, we should have made sure that Hermanson was in a different layer, or we should have made sure the other guy was out of the layer, or whatever." It was funny. It all worked out well, but it was funny watching it play on.
You get Elton Hermanson, who obviously a lot of guys liked. How exciting is it for you guys to add a player with that kind of high-end skill to the prospect pool? Like, you haven't had the chance to pick in that range in, 5-6 years since Clark, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's between trading first and where we've picked. It's funny. I think the stat is, I think only Tampa Bay has had fewer first round picks than we have since 2011, and I think we're the 4th worst starting pick in that time frame as well. So
I'm assuming you mean averaging like where in the first round that pick comes.
Yeah, the initial starting pick, we have the 4th worst initial first pick of the draft in those 15 years. So you don't usually have an opportunity to pick a guy this skilled, or if you do, there's usually a major flaw. When you're picking later in the first, you're usually you don't want to acquiesce and say, well, we're just going to get a 3rd line guy, or we're just going to get a bottom 6 player. You really want to do better than that, regardless of where you're picking, because we see it all the time. Guys who will go later than 20 or 25 will still become. You've got to find that guy. You got to hold yourself to that standard. But it was nice. It was nice. I mean, Hermanson's skill level alone is probably top six, top five in the draft, which is a really nice thing to add at 19. And then the good skating, good sense, and all that. But it was guys were very excited. The staff was very excited to get him.
When you're drafting 19th overall, you're obviously not getting a guy in the top tier. No offense to Elton Hermanson or anybody taking 19th, but top tier is, top 5 pick. Scott Wheeler, we spoke to earlier, he described this as a 14-player draft and then said he had Elton Hermanson as the top guy after you get through the top 14. Does that, without giving away, state secrets, does that sound close to how your team had it ranked?
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with the 14-person draft. I think he's being more generous than I would be. I think it might have been 9 or 10. But no, I think that's a fair assessment. I think Scott's, I think he's pretty good. I think he's a pretty good judge and evaluator both of talent and the draft. Well, I would say that without giving away that Hermanson would have been in that ballpark for us, whether it was a little higher or a little lower, I won't say, but yeah, that's fair. I mean, there was definitely a drop off at a certain point in the first round, whether you had it 9 or 10, whether you had it 14. But Hermanson would have been in the upper group of that next tier.
And because you guys went and looked at kind of this range compared to like years past, is it harder to differentiate between, say, those guys in this tier when the tier is higher, meaning you're dealing with like higher attributes, potentially higher ceiling players, versus picking like 25 to 30 when maybe some of those higher attributes are off the board and you're debating like different types of things in prospects?
I think it's easier to evaluate and debate higher level players because they have things that separate them. When you're talking about the top 5, they have things that separate them from when you're talking about the top 10. There's just natural separators in that group. And it's more fun too, because you're usually talking about a 5-tool player, to use a baseball analogy. And what you're kind of doing when you get to the 20s is you're looking at flaws now as much as you're looking at strengths. Like, here's his flaw. How much will this affect his ability to reach his A-level potential, or his strength might not be quite as good as those guys. So what's the balance between these strengths and these perceived weaknesses? And then the other guys, and the thing is, you usually open yourself up to a myriad of different strengths and weaknesses. The guy's big and he's a power forward, but he doesn't skate well and he doesn't come to play all the time. He doesn't compete all the time. Or this guy's really skilled and he skates really well, but his sense isn't there. Or he's small. Or so there's different things and different ways of evaluating it. But it was cool doing the Hermanson thing because you have guys like Hermanson, guys who went earlier like Cohen, that are kind of in that kind of vein of talent and pro potential. So it's harder, and as you're opening it up to more players, but it's still a really good exercise.
Mark, you said that Elton Hermanson has top 5 or 6 skill in the draft. He also has the confidence and personality to show off that skill. I mean, that was what came through watching clips for me. Was this is a guy who isn't shy to try things. This is a guy who isn't shy. I don't even know what the right word is, but like there are certain players where that they can do stuff, but you also have to have the confidence to even try it in the first place. And Hermanson, sizzle, swagger, whatever you want to call it, like he's got it. Did that come through on the personality side when you were scouting him?
So it certainly did. I think it surprised a lot of guys like Jonas Hoagland and Peter and Ruchu and I had gotten to meet him and known some of that. And then it just so happened that when we did our final meetings with all the guys there, he was one of the guys we did a Zoom interview with. And guys were really surprised by the interview and the personality. Because the one thing he needs to improve on is his compete, is his whatever people want to say, grit or physical accountability. And when you talk to him, he portrays a much different thing than you would expect a guy with maybe that area to work on. And there were 3 or 4 guys who, for the interview, just did some extra work because they really liked it. They were really surprised by the interview. He does. He has a little bit of that. A little bit. I don't want to go overboard. There's a little bit of that it factor. There's a confidence, a matter of fact confidence that just permeates him when you talk to him. And that's a really good thing when he's a skill guy and you want him to be a scorer. You want that matter of fact. You want that confidence. It's just, there's no bravado. It just comes out. And Swedes are humble. So when you can, as a wide generalization, that's one of the issues we have when we interview with some of the Swedes is it's hard to get them to talk about themselves. But it wasn't hard with him. We had a very good talk, very frank talk, and that confidence certainly permeated the interview.
Yank, is it difficult at all to differentiate between confidence and cockiness? You want one, maybe you don't want the other, or maybe you want a little bit of the other, but not too much of it.
I don't think it's hard to differentiate between the two. Sometimes it can be hard to differentiate between false confidence and confidence, because they're coached and they say the right things, and you have to kind of take what you see on the ice. But for me, you don't want arrogance, but a cockiness. A cockiness from a 12-goal scorer makes me a whole lot more concerned than cockiness from a 40-goal scorer, let's say. So, I don't mind cockiness if you have the resume and the credentials to back it up. Obviously, confidence is what you want. You want that quiet, supreme confidence, but it's also not bad to have a Zlatan-like confidence if you're one of those guys that just brings others along. But that's 1 in a million.
I'm going to go back pretty far in history here to ask this question. Trevor Lewis is taken 17th overall back in 2006. He winds up being a bottom 6 player. Gabe Vilardi goes 11th. He becomes a top 6 player. Rasmus Kupari goes 20th. He's a bottom 6 player out of the league. So where does this 19th overall Elton Hermansson, what's his trajectory? Bottom 6, top 6? Like, it seems to me like he's got to be a top 6 player if he makes it to the NHL.
If he doesn't hit top 6, we made an evaluation mistake. We evaluated him. Trevor Lewis was evaluated as a top 6 order. Like, he was more of an F7, but he's one of those swing guys. He did put up a lot of points in the USHL, but he was also riding shotgun with Okposo. So there was always the debate about how those points came about. But one of the things about Trevor Lewis that was more unique than like Kupari is Trevor Lewis's backup game was an A-level backup game. So, and that's what he hit. Trevor Lewis was arguably one of the best bottom 6s in the league for a long time. And then you got Kupari, who was drafted as that F7 in a similar way to Trevor Lewis, but the thought was he would be more offensive and he had less of a backup game. And the reason Kupari's out of the league is because he missed the top 6 and he doesn't quite have the backup game of a Lewis, so he's out of the league. Hermansson would be drafted as a top 6 and, not necessarily that F7 swing guy. He's being drafted. Some guys in our staff would have him as I think it's optimistic, but an F3. If I'm being more realistic, I think you're looking at an F5 or an F6 here.
All right, next player up on our list is Liam Lefebvre, taken 46th overall. Center, right shot, his strength, size, shot, skating, physicality. Sounds like a pretty decent player. Scott Wheeler said that even though he was drafted as a center, he projects him probably to be of a wing and maybe a bottom 6 wing. Based on the look on your face, it doesn't sound like you agree with that.
No, I just think it's listen, most centers drafted are going to become wings. That's just the reality of life.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 4 center positions, and you got eight or 9 wing positions depending on what you carry. So yeah, if you just always said that a guy's going to be a wing, you're going to be right 75% of the time. No, I don't I don't agree with that necessarily. I mean, odds would say he would be a wing, but I think there's a lot of stuff on him. His sense is sneaky, sneaky good. Uh, if you want to get a view of his sense, you can't go watch him play live, or you have to watch him a lot live. He makes these little short area plays, these little uh, pre-possession looks and instant plays, just these subtle short area plays, whether it's in the offensive zone or defensive zone, where you miss them because they look like they happen quickly. They look like it, and then you look at it on the film, and you see how good these plays are possession based. So that leads me to think he could, and his size. That leads me to think he could be a center at the next level. I agree with Scott on the bottom six, especially at center. If he's a wing, he could be a little higher. You never know. He's really underrated. Guys should go back and watch the tape on this guy before they talk. Um, that would be my advice. We had 3 scouts on our staff that if we didn't come out of the draft with this guy, if I had moved back, there'd be all that'd be left of me was whatever that LA Kings draft golf shirt, ripped in half. So no, this was a guy that we had targeted at 46 or 49. And this was a high priority guy for a lot of guys on our staff. He's big. He's got really good skill. As I said, his sense is sneaky and undervalued. He's got grit, toughness. He's not afraid to fight. The level of hockey he played at a year ago and the strides he's made simply in 1 year are astronomical. And this is the type of kid who takes ownership of his development. He's one of those intangible kids as well. I know how he did at camp. I think he opened some eyes at camp. Now that's just camp. It's camp's different. But it said you'd rather look good at camp than not look good at camp. And he showed some hands and some of those silky moves. As I said, I think this guy's an undervalued guy, an under the radar guy. Like White King was an under the radar guy. Matt Roy is an under the radar guy. Hey, Wayne Simmons and those guys are under the radar guys. I'm not saying he's going to be Wayne Simmons, but he's got a lot of attributes that I think people slept on. Anderson, he played better in big games, which is another thing we like.
Every year, there's guys you want to come away with. I can't remember hearing more about one player than I did from people in the organization about Liam. Like, it was like everyone was like, this dude is like a must-have for us. Not like a want, it was almost like a must-have. Like, were there things too in the interview and that kind of thing that aligned like what he was about with what the Kings are about, that just built on all of the on-ice attributes you mentioned?
Yeah, I try to slow the roll on guys. I'm kind of fortunate I don't really have an area. Like even when Fuchs and I were doing this together, Fuchs had an area, Ontario. Yeah, I'm in New England, but it's not, it's more of a pro area than an amateur area. So I have a certain perspective and distance from some of these leagues. But there were 2 guys, listen, everybody wanted this kid, but, Chris Byrne and Nick Sinclair were, I couldn't go a conversation. If I talked to Nick or I talked to Chris, I couldn't, this guy was slipped in, like, awkward segues, like, oh yeah, I was getting steaks. Oh, did you watch Lefebvre tonight? Like, it's just like they would, if it wasn't organic, they'd find some way just to jam him in there. And other guys were not as like driving the bus like those guys. But the same thing when you talk to this kid in the interview, I'm looking for reasons to slow his roll, to stop the upward trajectory. Just as I said, make guys reevaluate, make guys prove it over and over again. That's one of the roles I play with this. And every step of the way where they had to prove something with this kid, whether it was the interview or not, like the interview, same thing. It just solidified what guys were saying. And yeah, there's drafts you want to come out with. You could say it like I wanted to come out of the draft with Voinov. He was just my guy. That's my big. Tony wanted to come out of the draft with um, Nick Dowd. Teddy wanted to come out of the draft with the Ferrier. I mean, I could go down the list. I mean, and we couldn't do it. Pyatt wanted to come out of the draft with Kindle. There's no way that could happen. But there's always a guy in the draft, whether it's a first round or a seventh round guy that somebody really wants, and this would have been the guy for our draft.
He played for the Chicoutimi Sanguinines. I believe I said that correctly. They wind up playing in the Memorial Cup. I'm assuming, based on how strongly everybody felt about him, that you guys already had him well on your list and on your radar before that. So when a player like that winds up going to a tournament like that, is that just validation of your, of a scout's opinion that this player is great? Does it give an opportunity? Like, what if a player goes to a tournament like that and, they don't win the Memorial Cup, which they didn't? Is it just a bigger opportunity to tarnish the reputation, or is it a bigger opportunity to bolster the reputation?
Well, based on how scouting is done, it's a bigger opportunity to make unrealistic gains or unrealistic losses.
Mm-hmm.
You see it in the World Junior. You see it, especially, that's probably the biggest one. But you see it at the under 18. You see it at the prospects game. These single day tournament or these week long tournaments end up taking on this unbelievable significance, and a guy can rocket up or rocket down list based on a performance there when you have 6 to 9 months of data. So him going there, our staff would have preferred that Moncton won in the Quebec League playoffs. Our staff would have preferred that he didn't have a really good fight in the Memorial Cup. Our staff would have preferred that he didn't score a game-winning and game-tying goal in the finals. Our staff would have preferred that he didn't play as well but you can't root against the guy. But
I'm assuming you're saying they wished all that so that he would be lower on other teams' site.
Well, I mean, as I said, we were highly confident he'd be there at 46 to 49. I couldn't see that happening. And other staffs will have other guys like that too. Like Montreal will have a guy like. It's not like we're ahead of the game or anything. It's Montreal will have a guy that's way higher on their list than we do. We'll have a guy that's way higher on our list than St. Louis. Every staff will have one or two of those guys. But when you perform well, he becomes less and less of a secret. And I think we could have maybe even gotten him a little later before the Quebec League finals and the Memorial Cup.
I'm getting Jared Woolley vibes there from what you said when the Kings got Woolley. Different circumstances, but in the same wish he stayed in Junior B a little bit longer to keep him off the radar.
Yeah, it's not a bad comp. It's not a bad scenario. It's very similar scenario. They're different. They're very different people and players, but they do have some similarities too. But that's it's fair to say that. I mean, we wanted to come out of that draft with Jared Woolley, even so much so that we made a non-analytic move that went against numbers to trade up to get Woolley, where the trade technically didn't make sense based on the model. But even the analytics staff understood why we were doing it, and they semi-endorsed it because they understand that it's not just a sixth-round pick and trading. There was more to it than that. So it's a similar situation to that.
Another player taken in the second round is right-handed defenseman Adam Gollier, taken 49th overall. I'm going to try and crowbar this quote in, and I don't know if this is the right place to do it, but there's a quote about the band The Velvet Underground, Mark, and it says, "Nobody bought their album, but everybody who bought their album started a band." And I always took that to mean that, that they were sort of influential. That every player in this draft feels to me like a Velvet Underground pick, where maybe other teams wouldn't have taken them, but every scouting read on the Kings picks is like, oh yeah, that's a great pick. Oh yeah, that's a really high high value is the word I've heard a lot. And Adam Gollier fits that category. He's middle of the second round, so obviously he's not a top 5 pick. He's not a top 10 pick. He's not a first round pick, but I haven't heard anything really negative about Adam Gollier. I've only heard really positive things and people excited about the fact that the Kings got it.
Yeah, there's not really a negative. He could be a little more physical. He could use his body a little more. Now, that being said, it's hard for a 17-year-old. I mean, played in the World Junior. He's the youngest guy. He played in the men's league. He's the youngest guy. He did show a little bit more initiative in age group tournaments, which we liked. There was a more uh, he took more ownership of it. He took more of uh, a D1 role in those tournaments. He was the puck, the kind of the play and puck ran through him, especially at the U18. So yeah, he's an excellent skater. He's smart. He moves the puck really quickly. You have all kinds of different types of hockey sense. You've got progression based sense like a Doughty in his prime or a Carlson in his prime. You have a speed based sense like Makar. Again, you can even go back to a Vlasic, which would be more of Goyer's sense, which is just a very quick recognition, ultra quick sort. The puck's on a stick and it's up to the forwards early so they can build speed and get the puck with space. So that's kind of how Goyer's goes. He would go more towards that Vlasic level of just fast puck movement. And the thing is, with his feet, he can start moving the play up ice with his feet, so he doesn't. You see some of these guys pick their way up the ice and circle back, and then they find the guy, which is great. It's just a different. He's able to quickly separate, make a pass, and the puck's going north really fast. So that's kind of the thing that we like the best about him. He's going to have to take a little bit more initiative, both with the puck and without the puck, i.e., physically. There's more there with his sense and his skating, and he's got a really good shot. The problem is you don't know that because you got to watch 5 or 6 games before you can see him really. But when he does shoot it, especially again when he's playing against his peer group, he shoots it a lot more. But his shot is actually really, really good. I'd like to see him defer less to older guys, and that's what I'll be looking for next year. Okay, it's my time now. I'm not the 17-year-old young rookie in a men's league. It's time for me to. If he can figure that mindset thing out, I think there's a lot of room for a higher role. And if he can't, well, then he still fits into that skating, puck moving secondary defenseman role.
When I watch successful teams in the playoffs play, I feel like I see players like Adam Golger on every team's blue line. Like he just has that size skating combination. If he can move pucks like that, like, do you see him as that kind of modern type defenseman if he hits where he just does those kinds of things well? He might not run your power play one and stand out that way, but all these good teams have dudes like Adam Golger.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's different philosophies, right? I mean, there's the you know, like Carolina's philosophy is different than Vegas's, but we have arguments about this all the time. Like, um, you don't have to be as good a defenseman if the puck isn't in your end. Like, and it's funny, we have these arguments between analytic driven stuff and traditional driven stuff, and then even the moderates in the middle usually land one side or the other, and it's usually more towards the traditional defending. But um, yeah, he's a puck mover. The puck gets out of the zone quickly with him. Um, Again, as I said, if you're on that side of the fence, uh, he doesn't have to defend as well, or those type of players don't have to defend as well if the puck's not there. The thing about him is I do think he defends positionally well. As I said, the thing where he loses, it'll be a common theme where he loses in the defensive zone is physical one-on-one engagements. Now, 50% of that is because he's just overmatched, being a young kid, and 50% of that is because he has to be a little more driven. But if you want to talk about new age defenseman or whatever, he is that skating, quick puck moving. I don't know that I would use the word flashy. It's just when he's on the ice, the puck goes up the ice quickly.
He played 43 games, if I'm not mistaken, for Trenčín in the Slovak league. I've read he played over 20 minutes a night in a professional league, with adult men, male professional athletes. How does that show up in, his personality? Like, how does that show up on the pro con list? Like, is it a positive that he's able to, sit in a locker room 43 games out of the year amongst, presumably much older men than him?
Yeah, you know what, this is the big debate, right? The fact that a guy can play against men is just often considered a gold standard. But how often, like, I mean, with Shahar this year, we had to move him over because his minutes, when things get tough in those leagues, it's just like the NHL, even the AHL. When things get tough, coaches go to veterans. That's what it is. It's what they're comfortable with. You know what? Even college wants guys coming in at 20 now. Now that the rule change, but getting those guys in at 20 and 21 made the college coaches' lives a whole lot easier. So the fact that he could go to those types of leagues and we don't have to worry about moving. Oh, he's playing 20 minutes, he's playing 19 minutes. The odd game he plays 15 minutes. That's real minutes. So that's a testament to him. It's a testament to the level he can play at. Now the funny thing is it's the personality. It's still the personality of a 17-year-old. Like when you talk to him now, there's a language issue too. A lot of these kids now are speaking English well. His English isn't very good. It'll have to get better. It's one of the things we spoke to him about in terms of if he really wants to develop, he actually has to learn English. But he's a little bit more of a reserved guy. Now we'll see. Is that the case when he's with his peers? Less so. When he's speaking the same language, less so. But he's still very much a kid.
Next up on our list in the third round, taken 80th overall, another center or another right shot player, Blake Zelensky. I'm very curious to know what you see as Blake Zelensky's ceiling, because he sounds like a more polished player than other players with maybe higher ceilings skill-wise.
What's his ceiling? His ceiling would be an F6. Andy certainly, this not quite the way Lefebvre was by our staff, but this would have been a guy like that for Andy. I was slow burn on this kid, and Andy really had to convince me, and he did a very good job of convincing the whole staff. Something he had to convince more than others. Andy would probably say he thinks that's his ceiling. I think you're looking maybe F7 to F9 as the realistic potential. And then if things don't work out, he could be a fourth line guy. So, there's the lower end. Yeah, he could get to an F6. The lower end, he could fall to an F10. But 7 to 9, it looks like is his wheelhouse for me. If his skating could improve, maybe that would change it. Skating's not bad; it's just okay. But he's really smart. He's got underrated skill. It's funny. You look at all these guys in the USHL. They're talking about his offensive guys and this and that. He was at over a point a game. You look at some of the other guys that went earlier. They were just lower than him or slightly above him. So in terms of production that way, he actually is a very productive player. He's versatile in how he can produce. He's got above average sense, above average touch, good skill, works really hard. His compete is excellent. He fits the utility knife role. Like he's got a lot of kicks at the can. Like he could go as the two-way guy. There's enough offensive there that he could go as an offensive guy. There's enough backup game that he could go as a strictly defensive, fourth line guy. Where his skating, the more he can improve his skating, the higher it will trend on the positive side. But he's also one of those character guys, the intangible guys. He won that a special award at the USHL. I can't remember the name of it, but he was like the person of the year or whatever it was. So he's a high character guy.
The Boudreaux Award.
Yeah, that's what it was. The Boudreaux Award.
Yeah.
So that's embedded in his character, it'll be real interesting with him going to Providence this year, because I think he's another slightly under the radar U.S. guy. So it would be it'll be watching him play there for Lehman it'll be a really good thing. I think it's going to really help him.
We just talked with Scott Wheeler, and he called Blake Zelensky like almost like a prototypical Providence guy. Like he kind of just the way he plays fits the way Providence plays. Likes the kind of the kind of player that Nate and that staff like. Do you see that as a really good spot for him going forward?
And I think it's a great spot. I forget if I said this. It's never a bad thing to have your prospects going to winners and great developers and such. Like again, we talk about London, we talk about Denver. Just go take a look at Providence's record. See, Nate's won. He's developed guys. So yeah, I think it's anytime you can send a guy to a program like that, it's a benefit. And the fact that he's a Providence type player, that should help him automatically in the beginning, right? You got to get your foot in the door as a freshman, and it's a whole lot easier to get your foot in the door when you're a Providence guy or a Lehman guy than if you're not. So so as I said, it's I think it's a great place for him. I think I would. It's funny. We seem to get clusters. Like I think we had 2 guys going to Providence. We had 3 guys at Denver. 2 guys at London. It's not by design, but it's certainly a positive.
You mentioned Andy being high on Blake Zelensky. I'm assuming you're talking about Andy Johnson.
Yes.
Andy Johnson was the one who had first eyes on Hampton Slakinski, right?
Yes, it was either Andy or Teddy. Yeah, I think Andy actually had the first eyes on Slakinski. I think it happened. It happened really close. All 3 of us saw him really close together. But I do think it might have been Andy slightly in the lead.
The reason I ask is I'm just curious if amateur regional scouts start to get a book where you're like, man, this guy keeps hitting on hidden gems. Like, do you start taking their opinions? Like, does it become a sort of thing where like, well, if that guy likes him, there must be something that's worth it, even if it doesn't immediately scream out to you, oh, I get, I can see it. Do you say, well, this guy's never led me wrong before?
No, it certainly helps. I mean, I'm always cautious with new guys on the staff. So, but again, what you said, I have a bigger book on what Rutu does or what Teddy does. Fuda and Gasparini, what they did. Like when Payet came on the staff and Vijay and then Andy shortly after. They don't get on the staff without being really good evaluators. There's a process that we do. I really love our process for hiring guys. It's completely blind, not fake blind like some organizations do. But but that being said, you still need proof. Like Andy's first year or Ron's first year or Steph's first year, my comfort with taking their opinion is a whole lot different than year 3 or 4. The more time I spend with them, I talk. Whenever I'm with Ron, I can barely talk when I'm done. My larynx. I never talked that much in my life. The back and forth, the questions he asks, the debates we have. Bernie, same way. Like the debates. So you learn a whole lot through the process of just being with them because we're not just sitting in the car listening to music. It's and when I talk to Bernie, he wants to outdo me. If we have a debate, he wants to win. It's not like we're talking about the days of yore in hockey. Like he wants to stick it to me. He wants to prove that I know more about this guy, or I can, so there's skin in the game when we're talking a lot. And as I said, with Andy or whatever, it's different with each guy, but there's so many opportunities for them to prove how much they know in our staff. And you said it's Stakinski and now there were other guys who we didn't draft that he's been right on. So it certainly helps when, you're looking down the Rolodex and you're like, oh, he'd like these 4 guys. So that certainly plays into it. It takes a little while, but if you had been in the meetings, this year compared to 2 or 3 years ago, you would have seen a different Andy.
Next up is Igor Rybkin, goaltender. Listen, I wish it wasn't this simple, but he's huge. That's all. I mean, like, I think we have to. I think the conversation has to start there. He's 6'7", listed 207 pounds, and when you get him on skates and in the pads, we saw him at development camp. He's enormous.
Guy was stretching out of his jersey development camp. I don't think they had a size big enough for him.
And he's not. You should see him on the ice. I mean, he's got a mature face but an immature body. So there's going to be there's lots of room for him physically to change his strength and his body and stuff like that at that size. And if you look at him, the first thing you notice, you notice how big he is. But if you start watching his movements, like, big guys don't move well. That's the caveat, right? Little guys don't cover as much net, but they usually move really well. So if you watch Rimpinen or if you watch Ben Bishop, you're going to see opposite ends of the spectrum. Ripken moves surprisingly well for a big guy already. And one of the unique things about him is Steve and Billy. I got to see him in person. We got to watch him for 5 days. We got to watch him on the ice for hours. We got to watch him in the gym for hours. We got to speak to him twice. So there, among some of the other Russian goalies. So it was each day there were 4 goalies that we really liked at that Milstein camp. Each day was almost like a mini development camp and then an assessment at the end of it with Ribkin and a couple others. And it's funny. I think there were 4 goalies, 4 or 5 Russian goalies on our list, a couple at that camp, and I think each one of our scouts had a different Russian goalie at one, but Ribkin was in the top 3 for all of them. So it was really cool. It was, it worked really well for us too, because I thought we could move back on him. Just wasn't one of those. I know he was ranked 2nd on Central, but he just wasn't one of those names that was coming up like the late riser was Ivanov, and one of the late risers was Avchenko. So it seemed like this kid actually, despite being 2nd ranked in Central, was kind of being overlapped. So we were able to move and pick up another pick and still get him. So it was good. And as I said, Billy and Steve are now going into development camp with a different kind of knowledge on this kid. You can still get it with George and Slakinski, but even that, I mean, the level that they saw that this kid play, they have a book on him before he even sets foot in development camp. So that helps them, and it should eventually help Ribkin too.
So I'm looking at elite prospects on this guy, and maybe they don't have every league he's played in, but I only see like 40 games cumulative over the last 3 years, which is extremely low, even for a goalie. Like, how much book on like tape do you get on this guy versus how much are you kind of picking on the tools? Because obviously there's a ton to work with in terms of the tools. That just feels like so few games.
Yeah, and if he was hurt, he had a freak injury, fell in the mall. Like one of those wet floor with signs. I don't, and he actually, I'm not kidding. Like it was. That's why he missed some time. Like there,
straight out of a TV show.
Yeah, it's just weird. It's just one of those freak things. Well, there's enough, as I said. I mean, he's played 43 games. It's over the course of 3 years. You can still watch him. I don't know that I watched Hampton play. I bet you I watched him play 10 or 12 games between live views and video views. I had the same amount of views on this kid. Obviously, you can get more views of a John Bernier or a Vasilevsky or a Tuukka Rask, stuff like that. But I mean, still, I find if I watch a guy too much, it's not as good, and if I watch a guy too little, but 9 to 12 games is a really good sweet spot for watching guys, and we were able to do that based on this year. Now we also watch tape from last year, and as I said, you have a unique opportunity to watch ground floor foundational stuff at that camp in June. So in terms of the amount of information and stuff, I think it was very similar to any other goal. It was similar to Trable, who played in the USHL. Similar to the kid who played in the kid who played in Prince Albert. Like, even though they played way more games, I saw them all play pretty close to the same amount of times.
The elephant in the room on drafting a Russian player is whether or not he'll come over to play in North America, what the timeline is. As soon as he's drafted in the NHL draft, he goes in the CHL import draft and confirmed to me at development camp that he would come over and play for Moncton. I'm assuming you guys had to know that that was a possibility and that he was open to it before drafting him. It sounds like maybe not.
No, it's just we're well versed on the guys we draft plans for the next year.
Fair enough.
But
I guess my question is then, if he was a guy whose timeline was maybe he spends 5 or 6 years in Russia, does that
we would have
alter?
been less we would have been less enthusiastic.
All right, that's
if we couldn't get our hands, if we didn't think we could get our hands on this guy fairly quickly, we would have had less of an impetus to draft him that high.
All right.
Or will we leave it at that? But as I said,
that's the perfect answer.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. Next up is taken in the 4th round at 103rd, Thomas Vanderberg. And Mark, this one was very curious to me because you traded up to get this kid, but you didn't trade. You were set to pick at 113, I think, and you traded into 103 to take Thomas Vanderberg. 6 foot, 178 pounds, left shot center. First year eligible, played for the Ottawa 67s. He's from Brant Clark's hometown, if I'm not mistaken. So what's the scenario where you go, you know what, we're sitting here, we pick 10 picks later, but we need Thomas Vandenberg.
Well, a couple of things. So there's the first thing, the evaluation of the player, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, where Lefebvre had I hate when guys say my guy or this guy. That's a real scouting trope. And anytime someone says my guy, I get really aggravated. I almost tune him out because he's not. There's no your guy. That's where mistakes happen. But each guy does have a champ. There, like I said, there were guys who wanted Lefebvre. There were guys who wanted. There were guys who wanted. In that tier, there were guys who wanted Hermanson more than player B. And there are also guys in that tier who wanted player B more than Hermanson. But it was very close. But there still were Hermanson guys and player B guys. So Vandenberg had a champion, or he had a guy similar to Andy with Zawinski, and that's the first part. So there's the evaluation as the player. Then there's the part where there's a scout who has an emotional reaction to him. That's the second part. And then it just happened. Our list got blown out. So it was what's happened in the past. We had all the players on our list before Vandenberg were gone. And then we had him in a tier. All the guys in this tier were gone. And then we actually were moving over a round. And then the top 10 guys on our list and the round after him were gone. So it basically had Vandenberg on an island. And if he goes, we're losing tiers. We're losing multiple tiers and a round based on our perception of his value. So the thought was he could go in that next. That's his wheelhouse. That's it's where we drafted him. That's where we thought other teams would value him. Anywhere from 10 picks before him to 10 picks after him. And we thought if we did not draft Vandenberg, we would be losing a significant amount of tiers and a lot of value. So that's where that's the final part in moving up to get him. So it's being the list being blown out, and there's a guy in it's the island hole of Augusta. There's just water surrounding him on both sides, on all sides.
You look at Vandenberg as a player, you look at kind of what we read about him, you just see a lot of comparables, him and Blake Zelensky. Like, they're both going to Providence. They both have a lot that seems to be in common. Would you agree with that? Are they similar type guys?
Yeah, it's certainly similar. Vandenberg's a better skater. They're both complementary offensive players. Blake probably is a little bit more pronounced and versatile offensive game. Vandenberg's probably a little bit more opportunistic in his offensive game, a little bit more quickness based, a little bit more jumping on pucks or jumping to areas. They both compete really hard in terms of work ethic and pace, in terms of trying to inserting yourself into the game. Blake would probably be a little bit more physical, and that would probably be the biggest difference in the compete. But as you said, they're both complementary offensive guys. They do it in a little bit different ways, but they're also both kind of utility tool players. They're really good in a lot of different areas. As I said, the skating would be tilted in Vandenberg's, and then the physicality and maybe the individual offense would be tilted towards Blake.
We're moving on to the 5th round next, where you guys took a pair of defensemen, a left shot defenseman and a right shot defenseman. I find both of them really interesting. We're going to start with Verdi Svensk, taken 145th overall in the 5th round. Played in Liga. Will Scouch is in love with this kid, and everything we heard is just skating, and more skating.
Yeah, I mean, he's an elite skater. He's he's a top tier skater in the draft. Arguably on defense, maybe Belial would skate better than this kid. Maybe Belial wins in the mobility and agility end on the scale, but in terms of straight line speed and straight line skating and separation, he's probably in the top of the group. But he's definitely in the top tier of skating. He's less offensive than some of those skating guys, although he played a lot of games with the men. He wasn't able to do it as much, but he's a very good transitional player. He can skate it up the ice. He can separate from the first forechecker. He can bring the puck up the ice without losing speed, without causing guys to wait. And he moves the puck well. He's got to mature a little in his decision making. Sometimes he'll try to do a little too much, try to be a little bit too, I don't want to say fancy, but a little bit. You don't need to bring, with his skating, you don't need to bring as much risk into the game. Kind of like Golier, get it and move it and then jump. But yeah, as I said, when you have a guy with that one asset, you're later in the draft. You're not usually looking at a guy with a top tier asset in the draft. So that was very intriguing to us.
That goes right into what I was going to ask. Like, it's just, you don't see elite skater and round 5 paired together very often, right? Was this just, hey, we have a guy who does something that we can't teach him. He's available to us. We want to bring this kid in. We'll see if he can put on the weight that's maybe needed, or we can see if we can organizationally develop some of those other things that can get him on that path where you want him to be.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's the later you go in the draft, the less, I mean, again, you talk about 5-tool players. You get a 5-tool player in the top 5. Maybe you're lucky enough to get one in the top 10. By the time you get to the 2nd round, you're looking at a 3-tool player. By the time you get into the 4th round, you're looking at a 1-tool player, but not in the elite way. So as I said, anytime you can find an elite attribute, and the fact that it's skating certainly doesn't hurt. And our guys have shown the ability, our development guys have shown the ability to really address some of the issues on both sides of the puck that a defenseman might have. So, you look at some of the work they've done with guys in the past, like a Mikey Anderson or a Matt Roy, some of the stuff they're doing with Clark now, Woolley, Brushevitz. So some of the things that he doesn't do well are things that we do teach extremely well. So that's also a caveat, like in a good way, like, this needs to get better, but our guys teach that specific thing really well.
He was also taken in the import draft. It's not clear immediately that he'll come over. He has a contract with his team next season. How important is it? Obviously it's out of your hands now. He's been drafted, but when you're handing him a player off to the development staff, how important is it for him ultimately to come over to North America?
He's in the Chahar group. It's not important unless it goes wrong. And going wrong isn't the right way to say it. It's not if Chahar is over there and Golier's over there and Svensk is over there and they're playing 16, 17 minutes a game. Great. Our guys can go over there and work with them. Not a problem. We can bring them over here in the summer. As I said, obviously the ideal thing is to have everybody over here. But what you see now more and more and more are the guys who stay in the pro leagues, play in the World Juniors, and then if they're not getting the right ice time, there's always an out for them to come to junior. You're seeing it more and more and more. We've had guys that Chahar's done it, Dvorak's done it. Every team has guys that are doing it. So there's not really a downside anymore. Teams are much more well versed, much more in the moment on this. Right, it doesn't sneak up on you. There's communication. So Spence, Golier, even Chahar, we're in a no lose situation. They're playing for good teams in really good leagues, and should the ice time not be worth what they were, there's now an option for them to come over. So if Spence can secure a spot and play in the top 4, top 5 in the Liga, our guys will go over there and work with him, and it'll be great. And if you can't, there's always the other option of coming over mid-year.
Next up on the list, drafted 153rd overall in the 5th round, Gio Pantelis, right shot defenseman, 6'2", 214 pounds, out of Laval, Quebec. Mark, I'm in love with this kid already after talking to him to a few minutes. Everything I read was, defensive, solidly, big-bodied, Matt Green type player. And then I watch a couple highlight reels, and I'm seeing this kid whip the puck around the offensive zone in a way that Matt Green could never. Again, no disrespect to Matt Green, but am I crazy to love this kid?
No, there's a lot to like about him. Expectations. We got to be careful, but
no,
he's a big guy. Yeah, they're all going to be Conn Smythe winners.
Sure.
After you watch the first development camp, there's one bust and there's 35 right. Conn Smythe winners. Yeah. It's crazy. There's a lot. As I said, there's a lot he does well. He's big. He's a really good skater. He's physical. He's there's a heaviness to him. There's a consistency to his physicality. He hits through people. And again, when you're looking at that kind of defense first guy, his game with the puck trends more towards a blend type defenseman than what you typically see with the defense first guy. Now, with that, he does try to do some things that he shouldn't try to do. They bring some risk into the game where you wouldn't see a Mikey Anderson or a Matt Roy bring some of the risk into the game that this guy does. That being said, he's 17. You bring as much risk as you can into it now. Try to get as good as you can with the puck now. Try to learn what you can and can't get away with now, because you're not improving your skills when you're 21 or 22 in the American League. You're playing your role, fighting for ice time, fighting to get into the NHL. So I think it's a good plus, his game with the puck. If he can go back next year and continue with it, but start realizing when to risk, when not to risk, when to go for that second option play, when to go for the first option play. But as I said, it's an intriguing package, that's for sure.
The risk element is always fascinating to me because you see it even in the NHL. Like, you see guys who know exactly who they are and play to that. And then I think you see guys who maybe have one skill set but try to do too much and play to another. With guys who have figured it out, like you mentioned, the Andersons, the Roys, like I see it with Joel Edmondson. Joel Edmondson knows he's a glass and out guy. He goes glass and out. Like, do you see those things as being like coached out of players, or is it something that maybe just with experience you get more comfortable with and you kind of learn, hey, this is kind of the player I am, and you learn to play to those strengths?
Yeah, almost every kid has an identity crisis. We talked to 65 or 70 kids at the combine. There were 2 or 3 defensive defensemen in the combine. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. Everybody else was a two-way offensive defenseman. There were no every player in the combine was a 200-foot player and a power play guy, and that's great. And it's I was like that when I was young. You should be like that when you're young. But a couple of things happen. One is the smart guys figure it out on their own. There are the guys that are just better than everyone. You don't talk about them, but the other guys figure it out on their own. Then there are the guys that need a little bit of experiential learning. Tyler Toffoli, Tyler Toffoli gets called up to the NHL and doesn't get the puck out on the wall, and he's on the first plane back to Manchester. Well, he only needed one time to learn that, if I don't do A, B happens. So guys learn it that way. And then I said, the other thing too is his consequences. When you're a guy holding the puck too long or trying to make a cute play, there's a physical component and a physical consequence now. You get blown up, you do this. So there's a whole bunch of ways to learn it. And it's usually a mixture of all of them. Usually you have veterans in the team to tell you hey, stop it, knock it off, kid, or yeah, you should try that. So there's a support system and a myriad of ways that guys can figure it out or not. Usually, you learn by consequence, or you learn by carrot or consequence. If you make the right play and it's not quite the beating 2 4-checkers and then passing, it's just making the right play, and all of a sudden you get, instead of playing 12 minutes, you're playing 15. The light bulb goes off. Okay, if I do this, it's 3 extra minutes of ice time. Or the opposite happens. You give it away or you try that ill-advised pass and you go from 15 minutes to 12 minutes, or you go from 12 minutes to watching a game in the press box. You figure it out that way too. That's usually how guys figure it out, but I mean, when we signed McDermott, sent him back to Erie, he was playing on the power play with McDavid. And Fuchs and I were at a game, and he looked McDavid off one time on the power play. We're like, and he didn't get to the bench before McDavid explained to him very boisterously on the way to the bench, and the puck came to McDavid every time after that. So there's lots of ways to learn.
Next up in the 6th round at 177th overall, talking about, identity crises and age and veterans and everything, you take a guy who's in his 3rd year of eligibility, 20 years old, Alex Kostov. Now he's 6'4", 207 pounds, so he's big, but I would imagine part of that is the fact that it is his 3rd time through the draft.
Yeah, he's obviously more mature and more developed than some of his peers. The good news is, and again, you see various reasons why guys don't get drafted. One of the reasons is scouts make mistakes, and one of the reasons is guys aren't very good. The guys get better. So there's a whole bunch of things. Like if you look at some of the, we kind of started the trend of drafting draft plus ones and draft plus twos way back when. Before we knew too much and knew that you don't. But his skating was a problem 2 years ago. It still needs to get better, but his skating was a problem 2 years ago. And then a year ago it was better. It was better. It's just it wasn't good enough, but it was better. And then this year you're like, oh, damn, it's not that much of a problem anymore. And as a result, you see his game pick up, and then you see a little bit more physicality from him because there are certain situations he couldn't get into because his feet wouldn't allow him to get there. So you start seeing him be more of that 200-foot player. You start seeing have more of a rounded game. You start seeing him get more offensive production because he's not 2 steps behind. He's a step behind, or he's a half a step behind. Or in this situation, he's right there this time. He's right where he needs to be. So the progression of his skating has given us kind of that. Okay, this is a worthwhile. There's a calculated risk here. Okay, his skating has improved every year for the last 3 years. Why shouldn't it continue to improve? Now there'll come a spot where it levels off, but can he get to being slightly below average? Can he get to average? Pearson was below average skater his draft year. He was a below average skater his draft plus 1 year. He was an average skater his draft year, and then he became a above average skater in the NHL. So you don't know where the progression's going to end. He does look like his glide is just okay, and he has to work for it a little. So there is a ceiling on how good his skating can get because, while it's not like a technical flaw like a Mersch or a Movari where there's a very, very low ceiling on how much their skating can improve, it's still not like Pearson's where it was just a strength-based thing, just a development-based thing or a buy-in on his part-based thing. So it'll fall in between those two, but we see room for him to grow in the skating. We can see his weight get redistributed a little bit better. He's a big, solid kid. I think we can channel some of that in better ways, which should improve his skating. But as I said, he's got offensive tools. He can score. He can make plays. And this year, you saw his skating get to a point where he was in position to take advantage of those tools, where in years past he was just a bit late to take advantage of those tools.
Zach, I'm going to jump in and ask for a point of clarification from Mark. You mentioned his glide, Mark. I don't know what that means.
Oh, it's just ease of skating. So you watch an Ovechkin skate, um, and if you're just down at ice level, you can just hear it. Like you can hear you can hear him tearing up the ice. There's a power, and he works, but there's a power to his skating. He's an excellent skater, but he has to work for that skating. And then you have Lane Hudson, obviously a smaller guy. Lane Hudson just glides in and out. Like it's just super easy for him. McDavid it would be on that scale. It's just the ease of skating. Like there's guys who it's like when a shark stops swimming in the ocean, they sink to the bottom. The shark has to work for every inch he gets in the ocean. Um, these guys stop skating and they don't lose speed. They don't lose momentum. They're able to, when I say glide, they're able to keep their speed. An easy skater, someone who looks like he's light on his feet, things like that. So he's not an easy skater, Kotsov.
All right. Sorry about that, Zach, if you want to ask about Alex.
No, it was a good clarification.
It's just one of the terms we use. Other teams would probably say something different. Glide. I'm always of if you can say one word, you know what?
Sure.
People actually probably not, because when I talk, I don't shut up. So I should probably take my own advice. That's probably a little introspective moment there. Glide is the easy way to say it.
Glide. So yeah, Kostov, I mean, from what I saw, committed to play college next year, Quinnipiac. Like he's going to be a freshman. Zielinski, Vandenberg, they're all going to be freshmen, but one's 17, one's 18, one's 20. Does the curve have to maybe be a little bit steeper for Kostov going into college at 20? Like, do you say, okay, we want to see more from him as a freshman than maybe the younger kids, or is that maybe unfair just based on age?
I don't like to base it on age, although there has to be an age-related component built into development. But age is a tricky one. You could say developmental age. That's one of the things we do. Like Nick Dowd at 22 was not built like Kyle Clifford was at 17. Tyler Toffoli wasn't, like Mikey Anderson at the same age. They were just totally different. So there is some component of, non-age related development, like where they are with their body, where they are. Kotstoff should, at 20 years old going into college, you should have a head start. So I think a little bit more should be expected of you. Now, the one thing with Kotstoff is he has to improve his skating, where Vandenberg especially, and Zielinski's a better skater, even though that's one of his weaknesses. It's still fine. It's still not a problem. So it depends how much his skating will affect. College is a speed-based game. It's a hectic game. It's a much less hockey sense style of game. It's a pressure pursuit and ace-based game. So that would be a challenge for him, but that's actually a really good thing, because it should be the impetus to create a better skating, because you have to keep up. You have to play at a different pace than he's played at. So for me, I think Kotstoff's age stuff thing comes in the second half of the year. Assuming he does the right things, there'd be more expectations for me for Kostov in the second half of the year than the other guys. But yeah, a little bit more. I mean, he doesn't have as long to develop either. He plays 2 years of college, 4 years of college, comes out at 24. It's different than coming out of college at 21 or 22. So there is some age based into it, but for me, it's a little more nuanced than that. But yes, a little bit higher expectations tempered with the fact I want to see what happens with the skating.
We move into the 7th round now, 209th overall, Tobias Creston. And Mark, I'm calling this guy the J.J. Abrams mystery box player, because out of the 11 players you picked this year, Zach and I both do a little bit of, we try and learn as much about these players as we can, particularly before we speak to you. I found one clip of this kid playing, and it's a highlight clip on Facebook of all places, right? Like I'm searching for YouTube highlight reels. I get one 30-second clip on Facebook, nothing written about him. I talked to him at development camp. I learned one personal fact about him, and that's really all I've got on this kid. So who saw him? Why do you like him? Tell us about Tobias Creston.
Well, we have Mr. Ranchitz has a team in Berlin, so between we're over there multiple times during the year. Whether we're helping with development on the team, whether we're lending evaluation purposes, there's a constant and a consistent influx of, especially Rutu, more so than anybody. But we're over there quite a bit. The European guys we had the European meetings in Berlin at the rink in an office room there. So we tend to see German league players a little bit more than other teams, just from circumstance like that. He was also at the Berlin development camp, and it's similar to other, teams have development camps for everything. So we saw him on the ice there, worked with him. It'd be similar like the Milstein camp, except we actually have some guys that are on the ice and more interaction and more, and we control it. So he was there. So there was a familiarity with him, just through that kind of circumstance, and we'd seen him play. As I said, especially Christian, had seen him play more. He's a really competitive, uh, compete first guy, hard work, kind of drive on the ice, secondary skill, but he's he's more of a north south, go to the hard areas, compete in the hard areas, and win in the hard areas type of guy. And there's also a chance that he could be in Berlin, and we would have even more access to him there. So there's some nuance with that as well. But as I said, we saw him more through circumstance, and um, would we have missed him? We weren't over there as much. It's an interesting question. I'm not sure we'd be able to answer it. But that's just kind of how it organically developed.
He did play U18s. He's with Germany. We talked with Scott Wheeler. The only analyst publicly who had a book on him was Scott, and he pointed to his shot volume at the U18s and having that component of his game as well. Like, do guys like that sometimes go under the radar even at those tournaments when you play for a smaller country that doesn't succeed and doesn't, maybe those players don't stand out against the U.S. because the U.S. has 18 players taken in the first 3 rounds and Germany has so many fewer?
Oh, for sure. I mean, if especially if you're a forward and you get outshot 43-9, you better be big and physical, or you bet it's while it's easier to be the showcase of a team because they're not as good. If you're a good player in a bad team, you automatically rise to the top of that team. You're still hit with the fact that, I mean, Norway gets killed every time they play, except for when they play Belarus, or Germany gets handed to them every time they play, except when they play Latvia. So it's harder for those guys to showcase their abilities. Rarely do you get a Peterka, Stutzel, Draisaitl, or whatever. Where do where you get those type of players in a 3 or 4 year cycle where they can all be together and then they can lift each other up against a USA or a Canada or a Russia or Finland or Sweden. So it's hard sometimes to find those guys, and they can certainly fly under the radar.
Final pick for the Kings and second to last pick in the draft, taken 233rd overall in the 7th round, Lucas Ambrosio. Now, Mark, I am very curious about this one, despite the fact that he's the second to last player taken in the draft. You'd think maybe like, okay, well, what's to know? But the Kings traded back into the 7th round. You had taken 10 players already, and I don't remember where we were in the draft when the trade happened, but there were at least 10 or 13 picks left before you traded to get the 233rd pick. What was it about Lucas Ambrosio that you couldn't risk him not being drafted at all, that you wanted, that somebody on the staff wanted Lucas Ambrosio so badly to trade back into the 7th round to take him?
There were 2 guys available on our list still. If those guys were gone, the trade would have been contingent. We would have just gone back to Montreal. But there were 2 guys left that each one, it was higher on our list, obviously, in the 7th round. And each one of those players was valued by one or two of our scouting staff. Um, you're trading a seventh for a seventh. Last year there was no one. Last year we wanted to get out of the seventh round. We just couldn't. So, um, as I said, it's easy to get into the seventh round. Sometimes harder to get out of it. Our guys really liked two of the players. They were both still there. Ambrosio was the higher rated one. It just, as I said, in terms of a value standpoint, there were still guys left that our guys liked. Ambrosio's he's good size. He's a decent skater. He played. He's a hockey candidate. He's been on the World Under-18 team. He's not one of those 6'3" slug type guys or project type guys. There's some game to him. It said, if we need to get a seventh round pick next year, we'll get a seventh round pick. Do the same thing. So for me, it was the value for getting a guy that some of the scouts really liked, as opposed to leaving a hole in the seventh round next year. If there's a hole in the seventh round next year, I mean, it's not rocket science. It's not hard to fill seventh round holes. It's hard to fill first round holes. It's hard to fill second round holes. But in years, as I said, our hardest thing has not been getting seventh round picks. It's been getting rid of seventh round picks where we didn't want to make a pick. That's been the challenging thing. So listen, if either one of those two guys, we would have walked out with two scouts really happy. I'd seen both of them play, so it was easy for me to understand why they liked them. And as I said, it was just in terms of value, it just made sense. Why stop picking if there's a guy someone wants?
Hank, you brought up that he was involved in kind of the Team Canada setup. I feel like you don't usually see guys available in the seventh round who are on those teams. I feel like you look at those rosters and you see guys picked high in the drafts. Does that factor in a little that like this is the number one program and they have a guy like that in their mix? Someone must like him to some extent.
Well, yeah, it factors in the fact, he's, we've seen him play at that level against, again, the under-18 is arguably the best tournament a group of 18-year-olds can play in. Now, they can play in the World Juniors, but that's not an 18-year-old tournament. You're not quite playing against your peers at the World Juniors. So that is, arguably the highest level of hockey for an 18-year-old. And he played in that as a 17-year-old. He played in his, in the whatever you call them, the model camps, the area camps, like the U17s and stuff. So he's been able to play at that level for multiple years. So that gives you a level of confidence. He's a big guy who's skates well enough and certainly looks like his skating can improve. There doesn't seem to be any kind of technical issues there. He's a big body. He hasn't grown quite into it yet. He's able to play at that pace. He's able to succeed at that level. And we saw him a lot in the OHL as well. So all those things go into it. We didn't draft him just because he played for Hockey Canada, but it certainly doesn't hurt the guy. But again, just based on numbers, 60% of the Hockey Canada guys will, just like the US guys or whatever, 50% of them will never play an NHL game. So just making those teams is not reason enough to draft the guy. But when you put it in the body of work, it's certainly not a detriment to say, he played well against the best guys in his peers. Hockey Canada values him. Good programs usually value good people, good players. So, did it go into the decision in a small way, probably, or in a more of an ancillary, sideways? Yes. But the evaluation was done. That's a nice little cherry. That's a nice little finish work on the house, not the reason for the pick.
Final thought for me on the entire process, just talking about value and sort of using Lucas Ambrosio as a way to slingshot back through it. On that Team Canada under-18 team, you have Vandenberg and Ambrosio both on it, two players that the Kings traded up to pick, which means you had them ranked higher presumably than everybody else did, and they're both on that Team Canada. So I mean, it's everybody I've spoken to, from the analytics team, from the scouting staff, from external sources on the draft, everybody feels like the Kings got extraordinarily good value on a draft where you took 11 players. That's got to feel pretty good at first. I mean, obviously it's way too early to do any kind of real evaluation, but
Yeah, no. Listen, I try not to. I said I don't have any social media. I don't have anything. I try to stay away from that. I mean, yeah, it's great. I would rather have everybody give us an A for the draft than a D for the draft. But we still have to figure out. We've had really good drafts before. Um, we got to figure out. We got to make them players. We have to. Um, we have to transition. As I said, there's still so much. There's still so much that has to go on for these guys to become NHL regulars, and then there's so much to go on for them to become difference makers. So yeah, it's definitely a good thing. Like, we thought we had a good draft. I've been poring over the draft, like I've been pouring over the Velarde draft. I've been pouring over to a lesser, like that. I can pour over. I can pour over the Clark draft in a much different way. But when I'm pouring over this draft or the Green Tree draft, I'm doing more procedure stuff. The thing I liked about the last 2 or 3 drafts, the Brushevich draft, I only call it that because he's the first guy taken, the Hermanson draft, and the Green Tree draft, is we were able to put a procedure in place, especially the last 2 drafts. The procedure was not flawless, but the procedure was rock solid. I can't find an area in the last 2 drafts where procedurally we could have done something different, or where we were unprepared procedurally. So that's what I look at the last 2 drafts. And that's what gives me, is that if we do the procedure right, I think we have the right evaluators. And these last 2 drafts, it said, and I pour over them that way. You can't. Is Hermanson going to be an F3? Is Hermanson going to be an F6? Well, you can't know that. McDavid, but I mean, hell, there were people saying that McKenna should have been the 2nd pick and Stenberg should have been the 1st pick. So even that's undecided. So you try to look at the things you can look at. I like the fact that I guess you guys are saying that a lot of outside sources say it's a good draft. That's great. Because there's a lot of good evaluators out there, and they have no skin in the game, right? We're obviously going to value our draft artificially higher than that's. We value our prospects higher, just like Boston values their prospects higher than we would. It's a natural state of things. So when independent sources do it, it's certainly nice, but at the end of the day, we just got to figure out how to make all these guys, or as many of them as we can, players and then difference makers.
All right, Mark Yannetti, thank you as always for your time. We really appreciate it. Congrats on another draft under the belt, and I guess we'll talk to you in a year.
Perfect.
All right, thanks, Mark. Thanks for watching, Kings fans. We'll talk to you soon.